It's the show that was gonna save Star Wars! And then didn't! Alright, so several years ago when this show came out, I actually did a short DisneyCember on it, even though the show hadn't finished yet. In fact, it was only one season. I really built it up, and yeah, everyone was really building it up. Like, this was a hot show. And it seemed like it was hot for all the right reasons. It was the first time we saw a Star Wars show like this. I mean, what did we really have before? Ewoks and droids? The production value that went into it was crazy, and on top of that, it had so much atmosphere and great environments and a gripping story and characters that didn't say a lot verbally, but said so much more with their actions. But within only 3 seasons, it went from the hottest thing streaming to, what the hell are we doing? I know so many people who hated the last season of this, and well, I guess I'll be a little kinder to it. Like, I certainly didn't dislike it. I can't say I really enjoyed it either. It was certainly very underwhelming, as a lot of people have pointed out, very odd at times. So, how did this happen, and how did it affect the series as a whole now that it's wrapped up? The show centers around a Mandalorian, played by Pedro Pascal, who's part of a dying race of people who, let's say, are very dedicated to their traditions. They treat their fallen world as a religion, they're very strict about the rules, they never take their helmets off. Making his living as a bounty hunter, he's tasked with bringing a small creature to what's left of the Empire. But wouldn't you know it, this small creature just happens to form a bond with him, and I guess it also helps that he has incredible force powers. Of course, now he doesn't want to turn the little creature in, and he's constantly on the run, trying to pick up bounty jobs, still meet up with friends, not get killed by the small empire that's slowly getting bigger and bigger, and of course, find out what to do with this small child. So like I said before, the biggest strength of the show is its environment and atmosphere. This is clearly taken from a lot of westerns about the man with no name, but it's a little bit more than that. It's kind of taken from any story about a rogue who you don't know much about and doesn't talk much, but does a lot of badass stuff. He speaks with actions, not with words. With that said though, when he does speak, it is a very good performance. Yes, this show has a lot of visual storytelling, but I'm always amazed at the fact that this guy, without showing his face, still gets across so much personality. I didn't really know who Pedro Pascal was at the time. I don't know if a lot of people did, and man, it's just crazy how he can become these characters. I mean, he doesn't like put on a lot of makeup or do a lot of weird voices or anything like that. He just really changes who he is, and weirdly enough, in this performance where you don't see his face, that kind of comes across the most. There's both so much mystery about what this guy is about, but at the same time, you understand what he's all about very quickly. And that's not just good writing, that is good acting. That is a good performance from this guy who can't even show his face. He can't rely on anything but body language and his voice, and you don't get a ton about his backstory, and yet, he is incredibly intriguing. It's also pretty impressive how they get this little puppet to seem so alive too. Everyone called this thing Baby Yoda for so long, and yeah, you could make the argument he was just kind of made to sell toys, and man, they sure did, but again, it really does get across a lot with very little. More is said through the silences between these two characters than any dialogue. And Christ, I'm so glad it wasn't CG. I just feel like this wouldn't be as powerful if you just saw this flat, overexpressive cartoon the whole time. They had to work within their limitations. Heck, if anything, they created their own limitations. That's part of why this show was so interesting and fun. Despite it having a huge budget, and sure, using a lot of CG, a lot of stuff was handmade, and they knew the importance of it. What's supposed to draw you into the show is feeling like you're really there, because again, the characters don't say that much. So you have to really buy that these creatures you're fighting or making connections with are really right in front of you. And weirdly, you can believe that a lot easier when they're actually really in front of you. It also helps to have a really good supporting cast. Sure, the main characters don't talk that much, but the side characters of a bunch of different rogues and outlaws and bounty hunters more than balance that out. So okay, this show sounds fantastic, and for a while, it was. What went wrong? Well, without going too much into spoilers, Season 1 was really good and kinda stood on its own. Even if you didn't know much about Star Wars or really anything, you could still follow it okay and get into it. Season 2 definitely worked in some more characters from the lore, and yeah, some of it is really cool, like Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka was pretty neat to see. It was definitely working in more from the other shows and movies, like it was getting to a point where you had to see those other ones to follow what was going on, but not to a point that hurt the show. However, without giving away too much, there is a main character that leaves at the end of Season 2, and it feels right. It's a good goodbye. I mean, okay, the effects aren't always that great, everybody's made fun of that, but it was a good finale considering the connection these characters had. But then in another show, they completely renege on that, and suddenly the character's back in the cast again. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. Like, if you're gonna get rid of this character, get rid of them in the first season or the last season. You can't do it halfway. Honestly, I thought season 2 was gonna be the last season, but the show was so popular, it kinda took over another show, and people suddenly started to get Mandalorian fatigue because we can't even watch any other Star Wars show without them somehow inserting them into it. I'm not just talking about select cameo, I mean, they literally take over several episodes of Book of Boba Fett. So, when the third season started, which, again, if you didn't see Book of Boba Fett, you'd be like, wait, why is this character back in the cast again? People were kind of wondering, what's the point? And yeah, so was I for that matter. There was definitely a wanderer element to the show, but there was something very clear to work towards. And sure, if the first season had this character disappear and then the second season he had to kind of have a new quest, that would make sense. But for 2 seasons, we had this quest, we had this focus, and now it's suddenly resolved. So what are we going to do in the third season? Why is this interesting? Well, they really try to find things and kind of grasp at whatever they can, and I guess to their credit, try something new. Like, I do remember this one episode where we're just focusing on characters kind of being rehabilitated into a world after the Empire, and I thought that was actually very interesting, but it doesn't really connect that much to The Mandalorian, and as many people pointed out, it maybe experiments a little too much. Yeah, okay, let's talk about Jack Black and Lizzo. It's totally fine to work in some weird, goofy characters into this world. Hell, you're kind of expecting that, but there is kind of like a badass quality to it. Again, you're kind of looking at the rogues gallery, these outlaws, these badasses, and there's one episode where we're just kind of focusing on these prissy fops that talk in a very goofy way that I'm not sure if it's supposed to be funny or not, but if it is supposed to be funny, it's not getting laughs, and if it's not supposed to be funny, it's just off-putting. Everything in this episode felt off. Even Christopher Lloyd, you'd think he belonged so naturally in this world, and even he felt very, very disconnected. But so what? One bad episode. That can't ruin a whole season, can it? Well, I guess for many it did, but for me, it just started focusing on stuff that wasn't that interesting. I like this world of Mandalorians that they created, but I kind of like they were more kept to the side. Suddenly, they're more brought to the center, and that's not what was cool about them. It'd be like if we had a whole movie dedicated to Q from James Bond. Like, that's not what was fun about this character. What was fun is that you return to these people and you have so much mystery about them, and the little that was revealed was just the right amount. But with Season 3, not only do these characters get way too much focus, but it's split up with other things fighting for focus that not only did I not care about, but I feel like was trying to connect to other stuff in the Star Wars universe that maybe they kind of screwed up. There's a whole side story about clones in this that I'm just like, well, what do I care? And then somebody was telling me this might kind of explain the Emperor Snoke clone thing, and I'm just like, well, no, that wasn't even good to begin with. Why should I be invested in this? The only thing I could figure is maybe they thought they were going to do for Rise of Skywalker what the Clone Wars did for the prequels. Like, actually take the stuff that very clearly isn't good and transform it into something good, something that makes sense. But A, I don't think they did it very well. It was very hard to follow and just didn't keep my interest. And B, that wasn't the strength of the show. It was good because it was so self-reliant. And yes, they did bring in characters from other series and other movies and stuff, but if you didn't know who they were, you could still follow it enough. You might have 1 or 2 questions, but you could follow along. Not with Season 3. With Season 3, at the very least, if you're supposed to care, you have to know what's going on in pretty much everything Star Wars, and even as someone who I feel like has seen just about all of the Star Wars shows and movies, I had trouble keeping up, or at the very least, keeping any interest. But it still had good atmosphere and good environments, and yeah, I guess I do still like the main characters, but I think it lost its focus. So all those things I mentioned before that I do usually like, the environment, the atmosphere, the characters, are taken down a lot. I still enjoy them enough, but not anywhere close to the degree I did when it started out, or even continue to in Season 2. Well, I do hear they're supposed to be doing a movie, maybe that'll fix things up, but I don't know, even where the show ends, it kind of looks like it's just done. Heck, even at Season 2, I kind of felt like it was done. It was just so weird that it kept going. I guess there's still plenty of shows I love that don't exactly end on the best note, like Roseanne or Game of Thrones and so forth. But it is a little trickier when all the focus is mainly on one thing, and then at the end of season 2 it's wrapped up, and then season 3 we're supposed to still be invested. And it's only 3 seasons long. I guess in many respects it is kind of like the new trilogy that way. Like the first film really got people on board and excited. The second film had a lot of people split, but there were still folks who absolutely loved it. And then the third part just kind of let everybody down. I guess on the whole, adding everything up, I can say it's good enough. It started off great and could have ended great. But based on the layout and structure of the show, you kinda have to end it on a good note. It's like Lost, you just can't have a bad ending. Same thing with Game of Thrones, you just can't have a bad ending. Too much was riding on it, and this isn't quite to that degree, but it's kinda close. However, like I said, I don't think the last season was terrible, it was just very unfulfilling. For a show that for many Star Wars fans was kind of filling a void that they needed to be filled. Again, there's always kind of something that's always working with Star Wars and always not working with Star Wars now. And sometimes more things are working than not working, and other times more things are not working than working. Like right now, Star Wars isn't in the best place. However, there is still Andor. Andor is like the new Mandalorian. It breathed new life into the series, and it gave us a new point of view, and who knows, maybe that'll write itself into a corner and end up being really bad, but hopefully at that point there'll be another new Star Wars show or movie that'll pick up where the good left off. I try to be objective about all this, so I'm not going in expecting to hate anything Star Wars now ever since Lucas lost control, and again, I still stand by, it wasn't in the best place when he was in control. But I'm also not gonna pretend the absence of him suddenly makes this stuff good. When something doesn't work, I'll say it doesn't work, and Mandalorian starts off really working and ends really not working. Is it so bad it's a crime against nature? No, but it is a letdown. And for a show that could have been amazing all the way through, I get less Mandalorian and more meh, DeLorean.